everybody. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the NGO Forum event, which is part of the UN CSW. It's one of hundreds of events, but this is the best one, obviously. And our topic is violence against women. Does technology help or hinder? And we had a bit of a poll on the Hoover page. And of course, there are great things about technology involving women and connecting them, and there are also some threats. So we're going to discuss some of those pros and cons this morning. My name's Amanda Jackson. It's my privilege to connect Christian women across the world, especially those who are engaged in social justice. We've gathered a group of expert voices for this call, and I hope you enjoy and learn listening to them. They're going to talk from a faith perspective, but also a perspective that is common to all of us as women and men in many places around the world about violence against women and girls. And we also want to bring some hope and some possible answers, because it can get very disheartening to look at sometimes at the state of women and girls in many places around the world. I'm going to start by asking the Deputy Permanent Representative to the UN from Ghana, Mrs. Carolyn Apong-Ntiri, to say a few words of greeting. And it's wonderful that we have Mom with us this morning, because it brings us back to the fact that we are at the United Nations at a huge CSW event. It's the second largest event that happens in the calendar year of the United Nations. And we're thrilled to have you with us, Mrs. Apong-Ntiri. Would you like to say hello and bring your greetings from Ghana?
Hello, everyone, Excellencies, fellow participants. Good morning, and it's good to be part of this side event. So I don't know if you want me to go ahead with my remarks, or I hold on, please.
No, go ahead with your remarks. That would be lovely.
All right, thank you, Madam Moderator. At the outset, I wish to express appreciation to the World Evangelical Alliance for organizing this event and for the invitation to deliver remarks on violence, abuse, and power, and how the church is responding. I must say that I am very pleased to be with you to discuss this essential topic, especially at a time when the international community just observed the International Women's Day, and is also preparing towards the 25th anniversary of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which relates to women, peace, and security. As you are aware, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, during his remarks on the 2018 International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, described violence against women as a global pandemic and a moral affront to us all, a mark of shame on all our societies, and a major obstacle to inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development. I believe this description is apt and has thrown a challenge to every member of society, including the church, to transform the structures and cultures that allow violence in all its forms and manifestations to happen in the first place. Indeed, violence against women remains one of the most systemic and widespread violations of women's human rights. According to data from World Health Organization, globally, about 30% of women will be subjected to either physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Cognizance of the important role women play in the developmental processes in society, this statistic is very worrying and requires urgent action. It is imperative that we galvanize action to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, which negatively affects their physical, mental, sexual, and reproductive health, and potentially threatens their enjoyment of life and access to opportunities that are fundamental to development. The government of Ghana is committed to providing leadership towards ending such violence. We are of the view that no circumstance or state should warrant any form of violence against women. Ghana has therefore conducted and launched a research report on domestic violence to identify and adequately address this challenge. Also, the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit of the Ghana Police Service leads investigation and prosecution of all cases involving domestic violence and gender-based violence. In fact, we continue to spare no efforts in establishing and implementing national policies focused on gender equity as the National Strategic Framework on Ending Child Marriage, Justice for Children Policy, the Domestic Violence Act, and the Human Trafficking Act, among others. All these initiatives are in pursuance of achieving target 5.2 of the SDGs, which pertains to the elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls in public and private spheres. Despite the scale of the problem, violence against women is preventable. The health sector has an important role to play to provide comprehensive healthcare to women who have experienced violence and as an entry point for referring women to other support services as may be required. But beyond that, the church is definitely a great source for support against violence. Sadly, an overwhelming number of women and girls who are physically or sexually abused are in virtually all congregations. No church is immune. For the church to adequately respond to this unfortunate incident, I wish to make the following points. First, I urge the church to create a church climate of openness, acceptance, and safety that encourages victims of violence to speak freely of their pain without prejudice and seek refuge and healing. Second, spreading awareness of violence and abuse is one of the best things the church can do. It is important that the church organizes domestic violence and awareness-raising events, especially during the month of October, which is celebrated globally as a National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Third, I wish to encourage the church to periodically provide training to the clergy, youth leaders, and other church leaders on abuse prevention, detection, and intervention. Such training, I believe, will empower them to help shape discussion of issues concerning violence against women. Finally, there is the need for the church to create partnerships with other relevant organizations offering services to victims of domestic violence. It is my conviction that these partnerships will create a broad-based network for information sharing and ultimately to achieve the purpose of tackling violence against women and girls. I know that as Christians, we are admonished to forgive one another in all circumstances. However, permit me to emphasize that although forgiveness is an important Christian virtue, forgiveness alone without addressing violence may not be an effective response to address violence against women. It is essential that governments, civil society organizations, the church, and all other stakeholders reaffirm their commitment to end violence wherever and whenever it occurs, and support all women in fully realizing their potential. Indeed, the clarion call for a moral revolution that will replace the culture of violence in our societies with a culture of peace, love, tolerance, and respect for one another starts with us. With determination, I believe we will succeed. I thank you all.
Thank you so much. I think the ambassador, the deputy ambassador, raised some important points about the fact that this is a moral question. We're also going to be looking at violence across a broad range of issues. And it's my delight that we can have 3 speakers and then a 4th responder who come from very different parts of the world. I come from the UK, and yesterday, obviously, was International Women's Day. And around that time, every year in the Parliament of the UK, women MPs read out the names of women who have been killed in violence by men in the past year. In 2022, that number of women was 128. So that's over 2 women a week are killed mainly by partners or ex-partners or by some other member of their family. And one of the reasons we're having this call this morning, this event, is to highlight what the ambassador has pointed out, that one of the tasks that we can do is to raise awareness, not to stay silent, and to talk openly about the causes and the impact and also some solutions. So I've got some expert speakers here this morning, But if you are just arriving, can I just remind you that you can ask questions in the special Q&A section down the bottom of your screen. And please don't put questions in the chat. We might not notice them, but please put them in the Q&A special section, and we will come to them after people have had their chance to talk. But if you would like to put any personal comments or greetings or whatever in the chat, you are also welcome to do that. We will also be putting into the chat some resources and websites to help you as we go through this event. And you can find extra information about everything to do with our conversation this morning on the Hoover site of the NGO UNCSW, if you are connecting through that. If you aren't, then we will also give you some information later on about how you can access the PowerPoints and videos that we're using this morning. So our speakers, our first one is Gideon Paramalam from Nigeria, who with his wife Funmi runs a foundation dedicated to peace and freedom from violence and religious persecution. Women face that double whammy of violence because of their gender and violence because of their religion. And Gideon, I'm going to hand over to you to talk to us about that aspect of violence against women.
Thank you, Amanda. I hope everyone is hearing me. Amanda described some of us as experts. I'm not sure I'm an expert, but I'm a he for she. It's an expression for men who try to advocate for the rights of women and to make sure that women are not denied their fundamental human rights or are treated in a way that it's not so good, as the ambassador mentioned. Please permit me, my presentation is in a PowerPoint, and I would like to just go straight and try to share the screen. And I hope that we can sort of, I hope you can see my presentation. Can you all see it? Can you see it?
Yes, we can, Gideon. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So let me also do something to allow us. I hope that everything can come through together. Sorry about some of this. Okay, so it's not going the way I thought it should go. Oh. If you can see the screen, I wanted to see if I can just, yeah, I don't know why. I'm sorry about it.
Gideon, if you just start talking, I think we can all see enough of the screen to be able to.
Yeah, if you can see enough of the screen, yes. I want you to get rid of some of these things so I can put it on PowerPoint flow. I think that way it's a lot easier, but some of these things here would not let me. So let me just continue. If you can see the screen, it's okay. But once you can see it, I'm all right. Okay, so quickly, Amanda has taken time to explain what the importance of this program is, particularly this season, with respect to creating awareness, as the ambassador of Ghana said, on the plight of women. Now, violence against women, does technology help or hinder? And I want to share briefly from the Nigerian experience, from what I have. So quickly, I have a brief outline here, which you can see: violence against women in Nigeria, types of violence against women, persecution between gender and faith, abduction of women and girls, forced conversions and forced marriages, which are both systemic and structural persecution, and then the role of technology. I'm sure others will speak more, so I'm just going to quickly gloss over that, just say one or 2 points and move on. and then the role of the church in combating this menace. I hope I'll have the opportunity to share more, and then share a bit from my own personal experiences, which is my journey, and then also make a case on your role, and then we proceed to conclude. Now I have some images here, and I hope that they can help you to understand what I am trying to say. Now, the challenge also is that I have a few things here that are blocking my view, and I'm not able to, okay, great. I think I've done something, yeah. Introduction, you know, woman, blessed by God, broken by society. Despite the many advancements the world has recorded in many aspects of life, violence against women remains a common phenomenon across the globe. Defined by the United Nations as any act of gender-based violence that results in or likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts of coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in the public or in the private life. I have a picture here of a man trying to hit his wife. This is commonplace in our own society, and we're working hard to make sure that wife battery, it's under control. And the truth is that even Christians are not immune. We still have Christians who actually maltreat their wives. And it's something that I get the opportunity as a preacher to talk about and against from the pulpit. And now the second picture that you see below, it's a very classical case of young Christian girls who were abducted by Boko Haram, sexually harassed, forced into conversion to Islam. And it is only by the grace of God that those two ladies now were able to regain their freedom. They're still traumatized. These two women that you are seeing their picture were with me up till yesterday, and they're still broken. They're not able to talk about their story. In fact, it took a while before I got the opportunity to snap this picture so that I can just tell you that we're dealing with a real life situation here in Nigeria. And the next slide, it's women blessed by God. Okay, it's a way of introduction quickly. Now, sorry, so I move on again. Violence against women and girls in Nigeria. I have a quick statistics here that comes from Nigeria's National Gender-Based Violence Dashboard, the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, as at March 2023. And to my right, where you have the green, are the figures for 2022. Yesterday, I was communicating with the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs, who is actually right now in New York, and she asked me to give her the link for this meeting. So I kind of hope that she would be able to find time to be with us. So if she's here with us, it would be nice to acknowledge her towards the end. But this statistics is coming from what they keep in that federal ministry, okay? 13,890 reported cases, 529 fatal cases, 729 closed cases, and 4,375 open cases. And take a look. Look at the low numbers in the conversions. Only 33 convicted perpetrators. So lots of people commit these crimes against women, and not many of them are brought to bear. Now, if you go to the green, you would look at the numbers has increased significantly from 5,962 to 13,813. So from all columns is increase in 2022, 2023. But then you come back again and you take a look, only 33 convictions. So 33 in 2022 and 33 in 2023. So I'm not so sorry, as of March 2022. So we don't see so many convictions, and I think this is where the government needs to do a lot more to address these issues and these concerns and these challenges. Now also the Declaration of 1993, which is here. I'm going to save time, but I would like to say that as part of the efforts to end violence against women, the United Nations adopted the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women in 1993. That has contributed greatly to the progress reported so far, but more still needs to be done, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, where the issues are more prevalent. I would also add again that the church, as I said at the beginning, is not immune. So one of the things is that we need to be doing this more in our churches. We also need to be doing this more even in the mosque, because our Peace Foundation has the privilege and the opportunity of working together with Muslims across Nigeria. And we see that some of the things that Christian women experience, Muslim women also experience, but particularly Christian women have been targeted when it comes to terror and violent attacks and sexual abuse. So violence in Nigeria, there are a few of them that I want to highlight here. One is from traditional norms and practices, and then the culture of men's superiority over women, which again, is fallacy, the cultural permissiveness of wife beating and other forms of abuse. And sometimes I'm afraid the church shies away from talking about it. And then the culture of shame and silence, which places women, especially married ones in Nigeria, at great disadvantage. So when you look at women in Africa, who most of them are at risk, you can look at the ratio according to a BBC slide. So I move on quickly to talk about 5 types of violence against women in Nigeria. And some of these are highlighted here: physical violence, psychological violence, also called emotional violence, verbal abuse, and the rest of them. Sexual violence, very prevalent. This includes marital rape, incest, and sexual harassment, molestation, and other forms of sexual abuse. And then socioeconomic violence, which is a different kind of violence. This has to do with denying a woman access to material benefits, including employment, education, and even freedom of movement. Now, of course, this is not for all the women, but a number of women actually experience this in some parts of Nigeria. Women are not supposed to go to school. Girls are supposed to just stay at home and marry, and that's all. Okay, 5 is the harmful traditional practices or harmful cultural practices, which refers to all the obnoxious cultural norms that exist, which undermines the humanity and the dignity of women. So quickly, three broad categories of violence against women, which are direct violence, cultural violence, and structural violence. Women and girls who suffer from these violent acts end up with physical injuries, sexually transmitted diseases, depression, psychological disorders, and many die as a result. Just yesterday, I was actually talking with a young woman who has to take a month off work, and she's working in our office. And then she just shared with me, she's going through depression. What is the reason? Because of abuse as a woman, what she's gone through. And these are these are daily cases we live with every single day. Now, persecution between faith, gender, and persecution between gender and faith. Now, religious clashes in Nigeria and its impact on women. Some of these religious crises, you hear a lot about Nigeria. Women get raped. Believe you me, I have all kinds of stories that will move you, in which some Christian women have been picked up from their communities after they attack the communities, kidnap those women, took them to the bush, and they are ready to rape them. And some of these women will cry out, "Don't rape us, please don't." And then some of the adopters will say to them, "Okay, you keep on praying to your God, you keep on praying to your Jesus. Let's see whether he will answer you or Allah will answer you." Now, again, I'm not talking about trying to profile Islam here, but this is a fact of something that happened. And this woman cried out, but the rapers, Fulani herdsmen, would not listen and proceeded to rape them and told them, "You see, your Jesus has not answered you. So you have a choice now. either to believe the Quran and convert to Islam, which is more superior, or you continue to be Christians and you will become slaves. I have tons and tons upon stories to share with you. Some of the people, I know them one-on-one, but there's no time to go into that. But I chose to bring that quickly so that you can see what agenda and persecution and faith intertwine. Okay, yeah, the three broad categories, I've also shared them. And then, so I'm moving, I'm going to wrap up now very soon. And then technology, the role of technology. Okay, so in a way, technology helps, but in another way, technology also abates, makes it possible for women to continue to be harassed sexually through texting, through sex texting, through images, through all kinds of ways of getting at women. And so I think, again, I want to save time, so I don't want to comment on that. So the role of technology is here, you know, safely to say there's technology facilitated abuse. And I think it's good. Maybe I can comment on that during the Q&A. Now, the role of the church in Nigeria, the church has always actively played a role in calling out these acts of violence against women in its teachings and doctrines, leading and teaching people to be morally upright. The ambassador from Ghana mentioned something about morality on these issues. This is real. We'll need to continue to drum it up. The church is particularly very compassionate and accommodating of women experiencing any kind of abuse in their lives, okay? The shift in church now to protecting women. Before, it didn't used to be the case, but we're seeing more and more churches actually trying to protect women. Institutions have been set up to cater for women. And then some churches, such as the Church of Christ in Nations, have set up units to create enlightenment and assist survivors of gender violence. And then I come here, my own journey. What am I doing? Prayer mobilization within the church. I work with church leaders actually across Africa, and to some extent also or with church leaders across the globe because of some of the past leadership positions I've held in the global church. So I do a lot of prayer mobilization, advocacy, lots of advocacy, local and global. Do lots of advocacies for many of our girls who are held up in Boko Haram's captivity. Again, maybe during the Q&A, I can comment more. Counseling, as I mentioned yesterday, speaking to one of my staff, and then speaking truth to power within Nigeria, and then research so that we can get materials from research to influence advocacy. So I think at this point, I would stop and then hope that if there's another opportunity, I can come back and share more. Thank you, Amanda.
Chair, Madam Chair, you are muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Amanda.
Thank you, sorry. Thank you very much, Gideon. We definitely will have time to come back for discussion questions, but you've raised lots and lots of things about the role of the police, about low conviction rates, about how churches can be training people and using biblical language perhaps to reach their constituents and their congregations. We're going to go to the next speaker. I'm sorry, Gideon, you need to stop your screen sharing. That would be helpful. And
please, I'll do so now. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. We are going to go now to two speakers who represent various parts of the Baptist World Aid family, Baptist Church family, sorry, the Alliance. The first one is Valerie Duval-Pujol from France and Merritt Johnson from the United States. Merritt's going to speak first from the perspective of the women's section of the Baptist World Alliance, of which she is the president. And Valerie will tell us about their combined efforts to run campaigning on some of the aspects of what Gideon was talking about, but really focused on domestic abuse. Thank you very much, Merritt.
Thank you so much for the honor to be here. So thank you for the opportunity to partner with you, World Evangelical Alliance, and thank you, Reverend Gideon, for sharing, and also Deputy Ambassador. It was insightful to hear your comments and all that you have shared. And so in light of that, we've already received so much compelling and saddening information. And when we consider that, when the needs are so great, how can we make a positive impact for women? What is it that we can do both on an individual level, but also on a global level to be able to positively impact women? I think this is a profound question, and one that doesn't have a simple answer, especially as we survey the many challenges that exist for women. We're focusing specifically today on violence against women. You've heard the statistics already, but 1/3 of women worldwide have experienced violence by an intimate partner. So I think about that in the context of a worship service. When I sit in a room and I look around me at the sisters that are sitting in that space, realizing that 1/3 of those, 1 in every 3 chairs has experienced violence by an intimate partner is tragic. 18% of women have experienced physical and/or sexual violence by an intimate partner just within the last 12 months. So again, think about those you're seeing on the subway. Think about those that you're seeing in the grocery store, that 1 in 5 is experiencing just within the last year some type of extreme violence. So how then can we take a stand against this? And specifically for us at the Baptist World Alliance and Baptist World Alliance Women, we have asked ourselves, how can we stand against domestic violence? What active steps can we take? So I want to share just a few things about that discussion. And so much of this originated with a preparation for our quinquennial event. We were preparing, we have a World Congress that happens every 5 years and a Women's Summit. And so Jenny Intrican and Valerie Duval-Peugeot were preparing a workshop on the topic of domestic violence. And in preparing that session and presenting that session, we just felt compelled that it was not sufficient to just have a workshop one time every 5 years. So we needed a mechanism, we needed a resource, we needed an action step that gave us the opportunity, the platform to push forward action in this area. So how can we channel the energy and expertise of a global network? We have women in over 140 countries and territories around the world represented through Baptist World Alliance Women. So how could we channel that energy and expertise into active steps against domestic violence? How do you leverage the power of technology in 2023 to be able to create a global resource hub that could make an impact for the long term, to have a long-term resource that people can go to and get the information that they need, and as new information is created, to continue to add to that global resource hub? Interestingly, my role at the Baptist World Alliance and Baptist World Alliance Women, I wear 2 different hats. So I serve as the executive director of Baptist World Alliance Women, but I'm also director of communications and media for Baptist World Alliance. So often I'm asked the question about technology, and technology is a neutral medium. We think about all new technologies when they arise. So when cars were created, we could see that as a negative medium. We can see that as a positive medium. If someone is driving that vehicle recklessly, it's a negative medium. But when it's enabling you to be able to travel and to minister and to go places that you could never possibly access by foot, it's a positive medium. And technology is, in that same sense, a neutral medium. So how do we, as people of faith, leverage that medium in order to make it a source for good? And then also, we wanted to be able to encourage and inspire the global community to pursue education and advocacy. How do we inspire each church, each congregation, each community to begin actively taking steps to stand against domestic violence? It's not enough for us to gather the statistics. It's not enough for us to have workshops. It's not enough for us to present information if it's not followed by action in communities all around the world. And so from those discussions, our Stand Against Domestic Violence campaign was born. And as part of that, the main thrust of that initiative was to create standagainstdv.net, a resource hub that was created through a group of women that were compiled from around the world, representing each of our regions, to come together to be able to brainstorm, to gather information, to resource share, and then to review that information. And that while we come from a Baptist context, we did not isolate the resources to just resources created within Baptist life or even within Christian life, but trying to find the absolute best resources that we could and making them available here on Stand Against Domestic Violence Initiative's website, standagainstdv.net. We've tried to make it actionable. There are 3 quick questions here when you land on the homepage. So if a person arrives here as an individual, how can I learn more? Simple question. How can I then make a difference? And then how can I get my church, my community involved to be able to take steps against domestic violence? In compiling these resources, we broke them down into 6 different categories. You can see those represented here. So when you arrive at the site, you can click on the main menu to access and change the site to a different language if you need to access it in a language other than English. You click on resources and you can search based upon these various categories. If you're looking specifically for churches, there's a section for you. If you're looking for statistics, reports, data, there's a section for that. If you just want an overall understanding about what domestic violence is, there's a section for that, as well as for initiatives, ways to help, and even a special section for perpetrators. And this is an example of just what one of the resource pages looks like. So from the individual resource pages, you can see useful links. So much of the resources that we have compiled are available for free. So you can click there, you can see what country it originated from or which countries it's available in, which languages that the resource is available in, and then click through to be able to access them for your use and action. And so I want to share just quickly, we hope the video is going to work well for us here, but as part of our advocacy, as part of leveraging technology, we reached out to leaders across our global network and said, would you join us in standing against domestic violence? And would you just declare that? And that's what you will see here. I stand against domestic violence.
Eu me coloco contra a violência doméstica.
Domestic abuse is not okay.
I stand against domestic violence.
నేను గృహహింసకు వ్యతిరేకంగా నిలబడతాను.
Away to gender based violence. Away, away, away. Go.
So stop gender based violence.
Yo me opongo a la violencia doméstica.
I stand against domestic abuse.
I stand against domestic abuse.
I stand against domestic violence.
నేను గృహహింసకు వ్యతిరేకంగా నిలవబడతాను.
I stand against domestic abuse.
So how can you come alongside with this particular initiative? We would love for you to share this site with others. So standagainstdv.net. We truly want this to be a resource for the entire world to be able to access and utilize, and we need your help to make it as effective as it can be. So we welcome your resource recommendations. If you have resources that you have created, compiled, sourced within your communities, within your countries and context, please send those to us. We have a global team that will review those, and we'll be able to add those to our site and have as many resources as possible available through this resource hub. And then we'd also love to have your videos. I want to create as many of these testimonials that you just saw as possible. So if you're willing to record a video saying, I stand against domestic violence, and send that to us, we would love to share your testimony along with those around the world who are committing to stand against domestic violence. So I thank you so much for the honor to be able to share a little bit of what we are doing at the Baptist World Alliance and Baptist World Alliance Women in this area. And it's truly my honor to have an integral member of our response here with us, who's responding not only through the Baptist World Alliance, but in so many other ways and contexts as well. She's a spiritual hero of mine, an incredible theologian, and an incredible advocate for women around the world, Valerie Duval-Pojot.
Bonjour. This is going to be a personal testimony on how technologies have helped me to fight against domestic violence with other Christians, because together we are stronger. So first, I would like to share very shortly how I have got involved in advocating against domestic violence, because it's about storytelling as well and encouraging each other. As a woman, I have always felt sensitive to gender justice. My dad, a French Baptist minister, is a specialist in helping victims of sexual abuses, because yes, it happens also within churches. And I have always been aware of the terrible consequences of gender-based violence. Whilst I was studying theology to become a Bible translator, this is my job, I was shocked and hurt by some reactions of fellow male students claiming that as a woman, I was not allowed to preach or to teach. And in the following years of my work as Bible translator and theologian, I was struck by the weaponization of scriptures, the use of scriptures as weapons against women. I was giving conferences, training, or classes, and I have very often met women, Christian women, who were deeply suffering, who were silenced because of misinterpreted biblical text, especially by the Apostle Paul. And among them, there were many victims of domestic violence, who were believers, churchgoers, but victims of their husbands, also a Christian, whilst their church or pastor or sometimes husband would legitimate this violence by Bible verses wrongly interpreted. It created so much anger in me because my experience of the Bible is totally different. As a scholar with 2 PhD in Bible exegesis, I knew, I had studied and proved that the Bible is not a sexist text. Yes, patriarchal in its culture, but not in its message or perspective. The Bible is good news for women. And this weaponization of scriptures led me to do something for the victims. I have launched several initiatives and written different books. Well, they are in French, so learn French to read them. But this morning, I would like to talk about one of these initiatives where technology has helped me to advocate against domestic violence. In March 2018, I created an organization called Une place pour elles, a place for them. The idea is to raise awareness on the topic of domestic violence. I had listed all kinds of initiatives in my country, France, like shelters for victims and their children, counselors for perpetrators, hotline to give advice, but there was so little to raise awareness, to break the taboo. Domestic violence exists, the figures are terrible, we have heard them. And although even in my country where the laws are not too bad protecting women, well, there are many and many victims of domestic violence. So the idea of Une place pour elles is simple and totally free. On a chair in a public space like a school, a library, a city hall, a church, you put a sign saying a place for them. These women should have been with us but they are not. They have died of violence by their intimate partner. The sign says, globally, every 11 minutes, a woman or girl dies at the hands of an intimate partner or family member. Can we just pause on that figure? Globally, every 11 minutes, a woman or girl dies at the hands of an intimate partner. And it's a figure from the United Nations. So we mainly do this initiative on November 25th, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, but sometimes also on March the 8th. This initiative, in English, the Red Chair Initiative, gives the chance to speak out, take action where we are for free. It is very easy to set up in our community, town, organization. All you need is a chair and a sign that you can download on our website. The original ID came from Italy, Posto Occupato. The goal of the Global Action Day is to individually and collectively speak out for the women and girls who have lost their lives to violence. And we know these feminicides are only the visible part of a much bigger iceberg with many more invisible victims of verbal violence, sexual violence, financial violence, and so on, as Gideon has shared. We know there are also male victims, but the victims of domestic violence are predominantly female, hence the feminine pronoun in French, une place pour elle, it's a feminine. So here are some pictures of the initiative we have done, like in a cinema, or in a gym class, in a train station, or in a room for teachers in a high school, in an airport, or in a local church. It is very impressive to see how effective this simple action is in liberating the discussion. I personally am a believer, a Baptist, but many people doing it, doing the Red Chair Initiative are not. It's non-confessional, it speaks to everybody. And technology has enabled the initiative to go much further. 2 years ago, during the CSW, we were online because of COVID, and I attended a workshop like this one on domestic violence, and I heard Amanda Jackson speak. Yes, Amanda, who is here today with us. She had a panel of women from all across the globe, and it was a revelation to meet other Christians, other women who were also fighting the same fight as I was, especially within churches. So Amanda invited me then to the SNIDA, the Christian Network to End Domestic Abuse. We gather quarterly every 3 months for a visio through which we share resources, stories, challenges. And I felt so strongly encouraged to meet, even if virtually only, with women from all continents. And during one of the meetings, I shared about our initiative, the Red Chair in Place pour Elle, and the other women loved the idea. And later, when it was time for the preparation of 25th November campaign, the SNIDA members decided to adopt the Red Chair Initiative for the Action Day of 25th November and to implement it in their own context. The sign was translated into many different languages, and members of the SNIDA group did create specific resources to come along the Red Chair Initiative. The translation of a charter created by the NGO Restored that churches can use. We also created some prayers and preaching notes in many different languages. In the end, the Red Chair Initiative has been translated into German, English, Spanish, Romanian, Hungarian, Hindi, Urdu, Persian. You can find all these languages on the link here. And in November, thousands of people in community squares, offices, schools, and churches came across Red Chairs, giving a strong visual reminder of the thousands of women around the world who die each year because of domestic violence. SNIDA members organize over 30 creative events. I'm going to show you some pictures from this beautiful shop window display in England, organized by Restored. In Canada, a school assembly in British Columbia highlighted the danger of controlling behaviors in teenage relationship. A 16-year-old girl approached the speaker to tell her about the behavior of her boyfriend. For the first time, the teenager realized that this behavior was abusive. In Cameroon, a pastor's wife who counsels victims of abuse arranged for churches to join together dressed in orange to raise awareness in their city. At the office of the Anglican Communion in London, everyone walking through the entrance lobby passed a red chair with statistics about domestic abuse. The actions are not merely an abstract idea. In a small coffee shop, Christian bookstore in Hungary, the chair was a tragic reminder that one of their employees had been killed by her boyfriend earlier that year. The perpetrator was also employed at the bookstore. The shop's director comes from a family affected by abuse, so she was happy to get involved in that initiative. In Switzerland, the wet chair popped up again in a training day for pastors. So we call it the wet chair initiative, but it doesn't have to be wet. People have been very flexible and creative. The important is to implement it in your own context. So you see it pictures with other colors. A team from a Christian NGO in India organized events in 3 cities for more than 200 women from diverse backgrounds. So this was the first year that SNIDA organized that action of the Wet Chair initiative to wear awareness. And next year, we hope to do it into more languages. So what is your language? Would you consider translating the wet sign in your language and maybe do it in your own context at your workplace or at church? And that would help building more advocacy. Without technology, nothing of that would have happened. Internet, Zoom meetings have enabled women from different countries and continents to collaborate together, to share resources, to encourage each other. Will you also join us? Because together we are stronger.
Thank you so much to Merit and Valerie. So much information there. And so I'm just thank you very much. Lots of ideas coming, both positive ones and practical ones, and also, you know, statistics and facts that are also alarming and very sad from both Gideon and from the women that we've just heard. Please, if you've got any questions for clarification, then put them in the Q&A. Not many people are using it yet. You must have some questions or comments. Please use that. We would love to also direct you to the websites that we've been talking about. And they are all mentioned in the chat. Katie and I are putting them up. And please, if you're interested in joining a network around domestic abuse from a Christian perspective, then have a look at SNIDA. The email is up there if you would like to inquire, plus also the website if you scroll back through the chat. One of the reasons we're doing this call is to say, as the Deputy Ambassador reminded us, alliances and collaboration and partnership are so crucial when you're tackling a global issue like this. And it is encouraging for a start to know that we are together, as Valerie and Merit have pointed out. And it's also encouraging to know that we can share resources and ideas and not be lost in our sense of powerlessness. We're going to have a speaker now who perhaps is going to highlight a very modern problem, and that is the dark web. And I know that for many of us, we know a little bit about it, and perhaps we don't want to know about it. But if we have daughters, sons, we know that pornography, online pornography, is a huge and growing issue wherever anybody has a smartphone. It's not just a Western issue. It's very much an issue that impacts girls who perhaps are not really aware of what is happening and how to counter the insidious influence of violent pornographic material. We're going to go now to a video from Melinda Tankard-Reist, who is an Australian campaigner with a group called Collective Shout, which she founded. And she campaigns for a world free of sexploitation. And I think we can all agree that we would like that. Her focus today in her video is on the link between pornography and violence against women. And she's pre-recorded it because she's from Australia and the time there is not very kind for a live interview. Thank you, Katie, if you can show us Melinda's video.
so much for inviting me to be part of this significant panel, and a quick trigger warning for the content which relates to sexual violence. The global porn industry runs primarily on the backs of women and girls and disseminates sexual exploitation primarily online. It is a mammoth dispenser of sexualized violence and misogyny, the world's most powerful sexual groomer. It is also the world's largest department of education. Many titles feature the sexual abuse and rape of teen and underage girls. When the war in Ukraine broke out, the most popular search term on porn sites was for Ukrainian girl. The mass dehumanization of women and girls in mainstream porn leads to an epidemic of violence against them. We are confronted with big tech at its worst. Young men are learning to take pleasure in torture and humiliation videos fed a diet of rape porn and racist sexual abuse. Schoolboys entertain each other with gang rape videos, and girls are reduced to porn fantasy sex props. The global research establishes porn as a driver of violence against women and girls. This is recognised in Australia's new National Plan of Action to address violence against women. It states, pornography often depicts physical and verbal aggression towards women, male dominance and female submission, and non-consensual behaviours. Greater pornography use is associated with less progressive attitudes about gender roles, with the belief that women are sex objects, and with acceptance of myths about rape. It perpetuates sexist, misogynistic, and degrading views about women. These links are also made in a 2020 paper titled Pornography, Young People and Preventing Violence Against Women, published by Our Watch, which is Australia's peak body addressing violence against women. My latest book, He Chose Porn Over Me, Women Harmed by Men Who Use Porn, documents the lived experience of 25 women at the hands of compulsive porn-using partners. Many were subjected to sexual aggression and violence. Frontline worker Di McLeod, who is the director of the Gold Coast Centre Against Sexual Violence in Queensland, told me, in the past few years, we have had a huge increase in intimate partner rape of women from 14 to 80 plus. The biggest common denominator is consumption of porn by the offender, with offenders not able to differentiate between fantasy and reality, believing women are up for it 24/7, ascribing to the myth that no means yes and yes means anal, oblivious to injuries caused and never ever considering consent. We have seen a huge increase in deprivation of liberty, physical injuries, torture, drugging, filming, and sharing footage without consent. A UK study found that girls were being coerced into anal sex they didn't want and found painful. Why did they do it? Because boys, quote, wanted to copy what they saw in pornography. A UK report by the Children's Commissioner released just this January, titled A Lot of It Is Actually Just Abuse, Young People and Pornography, states depictions of degradation, sexual coercion, aggression and exploitation are commonplace and disproportionately targeted against teenage girls. The report found young people are frequently exposed to violent pornography depicting coercive, degrading, or pain-inducing sex acts. 79% had encountered violent pornography before the age of 18. Frequent users of pornography are more likely to engage in physically aggressive sex acts. The report also found young people 16 to 21 are more likely to assume that girls expect or enjoy sex involving physical aggression than don't. And girls were significantly more likely than boys to have experienced a violent sex act, which could be defined as aggressive, coercive, or degrading. These porn-inspired behaviours spill over into TikTok. KinkTok, which is a popular genre within TikTok, has 6.2 billion views on a platform where more than 30% of users are minors. There you'll see teens promoting choking, whipping, bondage, sadism, and submission. A 15-year-old is depicted fantasizing about being choked. And growing in popularity is the consensual, non-consensual, known as con-non-con genre, also known as rape play. The eroticization of the girl child for pedophilic fantasies is now mainstreamed on social media. We at Collective Shout track the predatory activities of men on the pages of underage girls. Instagram is essentially a predator's playground, and we call on social media platforms to stop facilitating them. Young women share their lived experiences with me in schools most days. They describe sexual harassment on a daily basis. They're touched, groped, demanded to send nudes. They're threatened with rape if they don't. Recently, girls were telling me boys were threatening to rape their mothers and even their sisters if they didn't send an image. The girls are subjected to boys making sexual moaning and groaning noises at them in the classroom, on the school bus, at the school camp, in the schoolyard. It's a daily occurrence. Boys want to enact the signature acts of pornography on them. More girls tell me that boys expect to choke them. Quote, "He put his hands around my neck without even asking." These everyday sexual affronts tell us a great deal about how entrenched the objectification of girls is. They also tell us how widespread is the callousing of our young men, the erosion of empathy, the decay of civil behaviour, and the social arson caused by mass porn saturation. Girls ask me to pass on messages to boys. Here's just a few of them. Please ask the boys to stop telling us about the porn they watched last night. Please ask the boys to stop ranking us according to the bodies of porn stars. Please ask the boys to stop rubbing up against us in corridors. Please ask the boys to stop sending us dick pics and pressuring us for nudes. And please ask the boys to stop making sexual groaning and moaning noises at us. My colleague James, not his real name, a research scientist at Oxford, has written profoundly about the need to de-radicalise boys from porn. Immersion in dehumanising online subcultures from the age of 11 resulted in, quote, "a radicalisation behind laptop screens and smartphones that preaches the objectification, dehumanisation and hatred of women and normalises sexual harassment, rape and child abuse." James had to rebuild his ethical framework. Quote, "I had to start seeing women as human beings again and not just as living sex dolls." James is a sign of hope. Growing numbers of men like him are speaking out against porn's toxic scripts. More young people recognise porn culture is making them sick. They are seeking deeper emotional and community connections. I see more teen girls refusing to comply, realising they have a right to stand up for themselves. They have a right to say no. Growing numbers of this new generation are signing up to activist movements like Collective Shout for a World Free of Sexploitation, which I founded with women activists 14 years ago. This is where I can at last show a positive side of online technology, primarily social media, where most of our victories are won. We've had billboards eroticizing violence against women taken down, sexist slogans removed from camper vans, sexualized clothing and toys removed from the shelves. Following a global campaign, MindGeek, which is the parent company of the mammoth porn dispenser that is Pornhub, was hauled before Canadian Parliament's Ethics Committee last year to give account for rape videos, non-consensual image sharing and content involving minors to be posted on its platform. There are now more than 100 civil actions being run on behalf of victims thanks to this campaign with our global partners. Age verification, proof of age protections to help protect children from porn exposure are being taken up in the UK, Italy, Spain and 4 US states and hopefully Australia. This is an acknowledgement that the vested interests of the porn industry should not be put before the welfare of children. We've pressured big tech companies to remove child sexual exploitation material. Twitter has added a tool to report child exploitation. We've got child sex abuse dolls removed from major e-commerce platforms such as Alibaba and Made in China. These are lifelike, anatomically correct, custom-designed children, toddlers and babies. We've had them removed. We're still working on Etsy. We've also got Instagram to remove 8 child sex doll accounts. Our campaigns in Australia and globally are gaining momentum. We'd love you to join us in our quest for a world free of sexploitation. Please join us, collectiveshout.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Katie, for showing us that video. The content of some of these talks that we've had this morning could be upsetting for some of you, and especially around pornography. As Melinda said, there was a trigger warning at the beginning of her talk, but we also need to acknowledge that our children, our grandchildren, our students in classrooms are being exposed to these pressures. And we need to be aware and to be able to take action and to have some positive, as Melinda said, that and not just be passive in our response to those threats to the lives of our young people. If you want to catch up with some of the statistics that have been presented by all our speakers this morning, and we've had a wealth of information, if it's all been a bit too much to get down on paper or as you're typing away, the recording of this event will be available from tomorrow on the Hoover site, if you have access to that. If you are not through the Hoover site, but you would like access to the recording, please, Katie's going to put up the email for how you can request the recording of this event so that you can see it again and share it and get some of that information a little bit more solidified in your mind, because we have covered an awful lot today. One of the things that Melinda was talking about is that we need to break the taboo. Valerie also mentioned that, the taboo in churches for discussing some of these issues, or for pretending perhaps that they don't happen in churches. We're going to have a discussion time now to start thinking about our response to some of these very serious issues. We've looked at violence from a broad variety of aspects, being used as a weapon against gender. In the case of also religion, we've also looked at violence in a domestic setting and violence online in pornography. Now, that's an awful lot to take in, but if you have questions and comments, please put them into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. Not many people are using that yet. Please, if you have some comments or questions, use that. We also have a few comments coming through in the chat, but if you can use the Q&A, that would make it easier for us to track. We're going to start the discussion by talking to a young woman from Pakistan, from Lahore. She works with the Anglican Church in her city, and she works a lot with young people on environmental issues and on gender issues with young women. And one of the things she does is work with young women who are trying to pursue their education, especially women who are a little bit outside the city centre. And thank you, Amal, for joining us. I'm not sure whether we can have two of us on screen at the same time, but if not, then we will have Amal because she's got she's going to talk to us. Ah, there she is. Thank you, Amal, for joining us. It's nighttime where you are, and we're very grateful for your presence.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Amanda, and hello, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you. It's an honor to have all our speakers, and it's an honor to have all the people who have joined online as well. I recognize lots of names, and it's great that you are with us. Amal, I'm just wondering, as an Asian woman of faith, what resonates with you in particular about that double threat of being a woman and being a Christian woman, or being a woman of faith?
Well, thank you, Amanda, for your question. It's an interesting one and very close to my heart. While talking of violence against women, it must now be understood that it is a global threat, just like Dr. Gideon was sharing, and also that women are blessed by God, but broken by society. It's a statement that really struck me. Unfortunately, women are easily linked to word violence as if they are synonyms. Being a girl or a woman is already a challenge in so many places. If I talk about South Asia, and when you are in a country or region where religion is a sensitive issue, then violence is expected, unfortunately. It's alarming when we realize it's every 1 in 3 women who are facing domestic violence, and globally, every 11 minutes, a girl or woman dies in the name of honor or by an intimate partner. So while I was looking at some of the statistics by the World Bank, it is estimated that 27% of women in their lifetime becomes victims of physical or sexual abuse. Particularly if we talk about South Asia, the prevalence of intimate partner violence is 35%, which is higher than the average globally. So the reasons, as we have already discussed, and I'm very thankful and fortunate enough to listen from very expert speakers that we had this morning. So the reasons worldwide are very complex, including socioeconomic disparities, patriarchal attitudes, and generalized roles. Why I've said generalized roles, because this is, girls should do that and boys should do that. So that's why I use the terms generalized roles. So this leaves women and girls with deep emotional trauma, disrupting their social, economic, physical, mental, and emotional needs. Furthermore, it is also a tragic loss of human potential, because girls and women suffering violence do not get a chance to access education, healthcare, employment, or a meaningful participation in society. So this is what violence does to women and girls globally. Thank you.
Thanks, Amal. Just a couple more questions whilst other people type in their questions in the Q&A if they've got them. I know you're a member of SNIDA, which stands for the Christian Network to End Domestic Abuse, and it brings people together from many, many countries around the world. I'm just wondering, how do you find it helpful to be connected with other people in different contexts?
Oh, yes. I would simply say that I'm blessed to be part of SNIDA, because the first thing I realized when I joined this group is that women around the globe are facing gender-based violence. And likewise, women around the globe are striving to end it. That was hopeful when I joined. So we at SNIDA.
I'm afraid Amal has frozen. So I will open the floor to discussion, and then we will come back to Amal, hopefully, when she is restored. Amal, are you back?
Sorry. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
We can now.
So,
yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just got disconnected, sorry. So I was saying that we at SNIDA meet quarterly and share resources. We organize events just like we are today organizing this event. So it helps us all in knowing various ways through which we can all make women in our regions technological efficient, financially independent, and confident enough to speak if they are facing something in their family or surroundings. So this shows that virtual platforms are interestingly becoming very productive, interactive, and inclusive. I would say irony of the pandemic is that it has left us with a new way to interact. No matter where we are, we all can connect, learn from one another, and spread the word in communities where we work. Because if I talk about the rural women in Pakistan or other South Asian countries, they are not technology efficient. So if we who have the access to online resource hubs can surely be able to empower these women. I believe if we make use of it in a better manner and more for such purposes, our hard work will definitely pay off. Thank you.
Thanks, Amal. And just one more story, because when we were preparing for this event, you told me about girls who living on the edge of Lahore, perhaps, who find difficulties with girls' education and accessing it. I'm just wondering whether you can just explain a little bit about that and an idea that you've come up with to help them overcome that problem.
Oh, that's interesting. And I would definitely like to share. Actually, women and girls in Pakistan stay back because their education is not a priority. At present, only 48% of the women are literate in Pakistan, regardless of hub of universities or colleges and schools. If there is an inflation crisis, a sick family member, or any other unfortunate situation, the first thing done by a family is to get their daughters out of school, which closes their opportunity to move forward. So I would like to share a small story of success. In April 2022, which is last year, I had the chance to meet some young dropout girls who left their schooling because of various reasons like family crisis and financial problems. And all of these young girls were the daughters of brick kiln workers, and they belong to villages around Lahore, as I told Amanda. So I interviewed them, and without a promise to get them back to school, I left. I just interviewed. I did not give them any promise that I'm going to support your education. But God had other plans for taking me there. So when those videos were officially and personally shared with some godly friends, they agreed to support education of these girls. And so the journey began. And interestingly, what happened that at present, we are now supporting 8 young schoolgirls who are living in slums and villages, and their families are not very financially strong. But what we do is they are living with their parents, but their fee is transferred online every month. And they even send us their report. They send us their fee receipts as a proof that we have continued our education. And this is all done through WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a simple application, but I just want to say that you do not have to take very big steps. These are some of the small steps that we can take. So what we do, we have, in one way or the other, we have now make them introduced with online banking system. So we transfer their fee to them, they get their fee, they pay it, send us the receipts. So this is how technology is helping those dropout schoolgirls to come back to the school, acquire education, and this is how we are contributing positively in society. So that's my small success story making big differences.
All those little success stories add up to a big success
Exactly.
story. Yeah,
that's right.
Thank you, Amal. I'm going to try
so
change over to Katie, who's going to facilitate or moderate our discussion time. Katie, I think you have a question for all of our speakers to start off with that does try to encapsulate that idea of how can we bring hope.
Thank you, Amanda. Before I ask all the speakers, I'm going to put a poll at the bottom of your screen for all the participants. This is a poll that some of you have answered on the Whova website, but you can also answer it here. So what I'm going to be doing is a question with a 2-choice option, and it's whether technology helps more or hinders more. Feel free to elaborate in the chat as well. All right, I believe it's launched, so you should be able. All right, good. Can everyone still hear me? You hear me clearly? Okay, so the #1 question to ask all of our speakers is, well, and maybe Valerie and Merritt could start first. We know that there's always hope. And we also know that there are a lot of different things people can use to end domestic violence. What are some of your biggest tips that people can do, whether they are a theologian, they work in the government, NGO, they just are interested in helping their community? What are your tips?
Well, tips to answer domestic violence. There is no magical recipe, but the first step, as Amal said, what is the next first step you may do? Maybe there are 2 different levels. If you are yourself a victim, then maybe call a helpline. We have given an address, the Hot Pitches website. Call a helpline, speak to someone you trust, don't stay alone, and repeat to yourself, this is not my fault. Nothing can legitimate violence. So please contact someone and speak about it. And if you feel you are calling, if God is calling you today, maybe to do something on domestic violence, if you feel there, something like, oh, these figures are so awful, what can I do? I'm maybe a churchgoer and I know that God is justice and love and I want to do something for this victim. Then get trained. Read books about it to identify the signs of domestic violence, to know what to say and not to say, not to make things worse. Maybe also get trained in biblical texts, because in our context in churches, there are really many misinterpreted texts. So you can read in French or English. In English, the book from Helen Painter, No, the Bible Doesn't Tell Me So. Or my book in French, the Bible sexist? And the answer is no. You can also contact associations involved in domestic violence to support them. They need your help, they need your time, they need your money. And it's not only Christian association, it can also be in your neighborhood. And you could also create your own resource. It means you can translate what is already existing. It's what we have been doing with the Wet Chair Initiative or the SNIDA. We did ask permission to the different organizations, but we translated into different languages resources. It's a good way to start, to be inspired by what others have been doing. So take a first step.
I agree with everything that Valerie shared. And I think from a faith-based perspective, what we would encourage and what we've been trying to encourage for Stand Against Domestic Violence within our Baptist community and the Christian community is to become that light in the darkness. So even the smallest light in a very dark space begins to eliminate the darkness and the shadows. And that's what we have been called to be, as the light of the world. So go to the leaders of your church community, go to your community center and say, I'd like to begin a program. I'd like to participate in the Red Chair Initiative, and begin to have those conversations and to be intentional about it. So even if it's just one time of year that you're trying to rally your community, your faith community around this topic, it starts to bring that awareness to the forefront. And as Valerie shared, our hearts break at those who are suffering in silence. So as we can begin to bring this forward, we've seen with other movements that people are speaking up and speaking out, and that now that silence barrier has been broken, there is hope there, and more people are able to get the help that they need. So I think as we just one by one begin to be voices, begin to shed light on this darkness, then we have just a ripple effect. So the light starts to dispel the darkness. More people feel that they can come forward when they are suffering to get the help that they need. More people start to become educated. And I think this has to also be a targeted effort with young people. So we heard so much in the presentation about sexploitation. So I think from a very young age, being able to educate young men, young women, what it looks like to understand the propensity towards violence that's being pushed upon them. And all of these negative images, all the things that are being pushed forth, that they can say, no, I'm going to choose a different path. So starting at a very young age, and then making sure that this is something that's on the forefront of our churches in terms of addressing it, even if it's just one time of year, start there and then see how it begins to grow from there.
Thank you, both of you. I think that's also a good point that you said, picking a time in the year. It could be like the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, which we did last year. It could be something like yesterday for people. It could probably be any day that works for you, just as long as it's picking something, making a deadline. Gideon, we'd love to hear some of your tips or suggestions you would have. Maybe you've discovered working in partnership over the years, you and your wife. This is tips, hopeful ideas for helping to end domestic violence. Oh, you're muted. If you could just unmute real quick.
Unmute myself. Okay. Am I?
Perfect.
Me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Amal, as well. Yeah, I was thinking, I think the other responses from those who spoke, Valerie and the other speaker, I think I agree with them. What I was just thinking about is that, sometimes the church leaders may also be people who abuse their wives. And in that case, they may be less likely to do something about it. So what do you do? Church elders are very powerful. Church deacons are very powerful. So some of the church elders, if there's a way to encourage some of the church elders to make this an issue of concern, make some of them he for she's, and then they can be able to get the church leaders, either a pastor or president, to begin to think about doing something to help the women. The other thing also is to continue to encourage women to speak up. What I notice is that if women know that there are other powerful voices who support them, then they have encouragement, motivation to speak up. So I think I would encourage that women should continue to speak up. Keeping quiet, it's worse. So it's better they speak up. I like the idea of collective shout. So now we join our voices. The women are shouting, the men are also shouting. Somehow, somebody would listen somewhere, someday. And then the whole issue of praying about it, I don't mean to over-spiritualize it, but sometimes prayer works. So if we can also make this a prayer item in the church, in our homes, we can begin to talk to our children. I don't think people spend time to talk about domestic violence against women in family devotions. You hardly ever hear it as a point of prayer in the church. So maybe we could begin to encourage that this be promoted. And then my last point, Kathy, is to encourage, there are student groups, that's where I come from, IFIS, Scripture Union, and several of them. We have them in Pakistan, we have them in India, we have them in the UK, we have them in the US, we have them in many countries around the world. I would encourage some of those who advocate for domestic abuse against women to begin to start to lobby in the positive sense, not negative, but to reach out to some of these leaders of student ministries around the world, right from high schools to those in the universities, to talk about these issues and encourage them to mainstream them into some of their training programs. I don't want to talk too much, but I hope I can leave it here.
Those were excellent. Thank you. I've been typing them in the chat if anyone wants to look there for some of the notes, but I'm sure all of the speakers are willing to answer questions in the future. So if you have any questions for them, you can email at us. Amanda put the email in the chat before, so did I. It's nita@restored-uk.org. So we will pass these on to the speakers if something comes up to you. But Amal, could you please share your ideas?
My idea is to do something practically. As I always emphasize, that if we are not doers of the word, because then whatever we are speaking, it has got nothing. But the thing is that when we are doing something, we are giving awareness to the community, then we should also be the ones who should implement. I'm very much impressed by what my fellow speakers were saying, that we need to raise awareness in young minds, because if you tell somebody not to do that, you continue to tell them, you continue to instill in their mind, after 5 years or 10 years, they will have this understanding, yes, we do not have to do this, this is wrong. If our fellow sister Melinda was talking about pornography, why is that? I would say that in Pakistan, we have witnessed child rapes. We have witnessed mentally retarded women being raped. Why? Because they have the access to pornography. And this has created so much problem that even our young generation in Pakistan has now become abused to drugs. Pornography and drug addiction is, killing every young mind in Pakistan today. And it's innumerable. You cannot count how many people. It's innumerable. And I think young children, they have a clean mind. So if you keep telling them from a very young age about the do's and don'ts, about the good and wrong, about all these things, the moralities and immoralities, definitely the change would come. So this is amazing thoughts that our speakers have shared, and I think we should start from now. Dr. Gideon, I would really appreciate that you said that keep shouting, somebody would hear. Yes, I always say that one has to speak out. If you would not speak out, nothing can change. So you have to shout, cry, speak out, so that you can bring change, not just in your life, but in others. Because when we speak, we become an inspiration for those who cannot speak, or the fear of coming out with what they are experiencing. So let's inspire each other and hope for the better good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mo.
I'm sorry, Katie, we have to finish there because we have gone just a little bit over our time that's allotted to us. And I think we have probably covered most questions, although there was one from Becca that we didn't get to cover. Becca, we will make sure that Gideon addresses that. We'll pass on that question to him. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and contributors today. It's a huge issue, and I hope that we've managed to have that balance of factual information and also actions for hope. Because that was our plan. So the recording is going to be switched off now. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you especially to our speakers. We pray that you are stirred and encouraged.